welcome to another edition of Sports Talk Weekly. I'm your host, Chris Jester, and I'm joined tonight by Josh Gomez. Josh, how are you doing?
Hey, pretty good. How about you?
I'm all right. And also joined by Randy Bellew. Randy, how are you doing?
Good evening.
All right. We have some sad news to start the show with tonight. Last Saturday night, Tyrone Moore, younger brother of Falcons wide receiver Roddy White, passed away. He was gunned down outside a Charleston, South Carolina nightclub. He was 21 years old. So thoughts and prayers to the White-Moore family. And Josh, I know you're a Falcons fan, so how did this affect you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was kind of shocking just to hear about it just in general, because also, the average NFL fan is going to know this, but his younger brother actually, Roddy White's younger brother actually lived with him, and his younger brother actually living with him was a major part of the reason why he turned his career around back in 2007, because he was if people forget, before 2007, he was looked at as an abject bust in the NFL, and he was on the verge of being kicked out of the league until he gave up his partying ways and basically all the stuff that his younger brother seemed to be involved with as well. The Falcons, they put out an official statement, basically condolences, just like we are right now. And according to Pro Football Talk, there's already a suspect in custody regarding the shooting.
That's good. Randy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Thoughts and prayers to his family. That's just terrible. Anyone at such a young age passing away is horrible. But to have a life cut short like that, I'm sure whatever it was over, it probably wasn't worth losing your life over.
And just one more thing. I couldn't imagine, because I have a younger brother. I couldn't imagine what I would do if something like this happened to him.
That's crazy. I think about it, he's younger than all three of us. So that's pretty nuts to imagine to lose your life so early. It's such a silly thing, and I think it's a big reason why the NFL is always trying to crack down on those guys going to nightclubs and stuff, because this is a dangerous. Those can be dangerous areas. You want to try to keep yourself out of trouble. You're making millions of dollars to play a game. You've got a great life. Don't risk it. It's unfortunate that his brother was in that position, but I'm glad he was able to keep Roddy on the straight path, and it's too bad what happened to him, but thoughts and prayers to his family again, and it's a shame. We're gonna go ahead and go into a brighter note and talk about some NBA playoffs. The conference championships are going on right now. We're on Game 3 of both series. We'll start off with the Eastern Conference Finals. Tomorrow night, the Pacers and Heat play, I believe, at 8:30. Paul George had a concussion in Game 2. He got kneed in the head by Dwayne Wade doing his best Daniel Bryan impression. And George is questionable for the game. So, Randy, I know you're a Pacers fan. If George can't play, what are the Pacers' chances against the Heat?
Well, without him, I don't think there's any chance at all. Thankfully, he was just about 25 minutes ago, he was cleared to play. He's passed the concussion test. But I will say that in order for the Pacers to beat the Heat, it's going to take a full team effort, and not just on the offensive end, his ability on the defensive end, along with Lance Stevenson and, of course, Roy Hibbert inside patrolling the paint. It's what's going to help them if they're going to be successful.
Right. Do you think this is a must-win for the Pacers?
No. I think they just need to split one of these two games. I think if you can get back to Game 5 in Indianapolis with the series tied 2-2, I think they have a good chance. I'm not predicting a winner in the series or anything like that. But I definitely think that I see the series going most likely 7 games. I could see it ending in 6, but I think that if the Pacers get one of these next 2 games, I think they'll be in okay shape.
I'd agree with that. I don't think it's a sky is falling situation that they lost Game 2. It was a close game. I think one of the really big keys as to why Miami's got a really good chance of winning the series is Dwayne Wade is playing amazing. He's 23 points Game 2, 25 Game 1. Came into the playoffs scoring 19 points a game. He's having a resurgence. He's healthy, and when Dwayne Wade is healthy, the Heat are scary. So I think one of the big reasons that Miami lost Game 1 was Chris Bosh was 0 for 5 from three-point land, and I think that Indiana, if Bosh can go out there and he can't hit those shots, then it's not as big of a deal if Hibbert follows him out there. So Hibbert can stay inside, he can control the paint, he can get rebounds. That bodes well for Indiana. So Bosh, finding his newly found shooting ability that he acquired this year is going to be a big deal. Is going to be a big part of how Miami wins the series. But Wade and LeBron, scoring 25 a night. That's 50 points right there. You got to be able to score a little better if you're going to stop Miami. If two of their players are accounting for 50 points, that's a problem. Josh, what are your thoughts on the series?
First of all, you forgot the biggest reason why the Pacers won Game 1 is because they must have listened to last week's show.
Yeah.
When I predicted a sweep, okay.
Yeah.
You made them mad, man. The Midwest hates you.
But also just a small thing about the Bosch shooting thing. To be fair, his last year in Toronto, he was top 10 scorer. So you always knew how to score. It was just with the way when we have two players like Dwayne Wade and LeBron James that are as dominant as they are, you're not gonna get your 20 and 10 a night. But Dwayne Wade, it seems like Dwayne Wade does this every year in the playoffs. He plays like 10 games during the regular season because he plays 10 games in the regular season with a combined 15 minutes. But once it's like the hard thing with the Seahawks is last year. He was healthy, he's rested. He hasn't taken the pounding that most of these players have.
Well, I definitely think too. When you're talking about Dwayne Wade and his health, I think you're going to see that resurgence from him, especially challenged by a player like Lance Stevenson, who, let's face it, they don't like each other. I mean, it's pretty obvious. But I think the one thing is, how will his health be once we get to games 6 and 7? How will it be then? But I mean, even if you're giving up 50 points from LeBron and Dwayne Wade, if you're the Pacers, you're almost okay giving that up because you're not going to completely stop them. But if you give up 50 points from those two guys, you got to make sure that you're not letting a guy like Ray Allen or Chris Bosh get off because they're still going to need 30 or 40 more points in order to win that game.
Speaking of the Wade and Stevenson thing, let's talk a little about Stevenson's flopping here in Game 2. He got fined $5,000 for his acting job, and I know he had a similar situation last year during the conference finals. He got fined $3,000 for. Come on, like I know all the players flop, but at least take some better acting lessons, Stevenson. Man, that was atrocious. He got not elbowed, and he flew backward, and he laid on the ground and played dead for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
That was very European of him.
It was. Yeah.
Play for the Raptors.
I will tell you this though: if I would have told you the two scores in the first two games would have been 107-96 and 87-83, would you believe that the Pacers won the 107-96 game and the Heat won the 87-83? And this series so far has just almost made no sense.
Right. I'm glad it's more competitive than a lot of people thought it would be. Like my colleague over here calling sweep on the show last week.
I thought we were talking about the Western Conference Finals, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad it's been a competitive series. I think I always knew Indiana would play Miami a lot harder than they played those other teams. It's part of the fact is they don't like them, and the other part is they seem to play up to their competition. It's going to be a good series. I honestly don't know who's going to win, unlike the other series where I think we're all pretty sure who's going to win that one. And I guess we can segue into that one. The San Antonio Spurs hold a 2-game lead over the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they've clearly really missed Serge Ibaka. Game 1, the Spurs had 60-plus points in the paint. That's absurd. And then the Thunder tried to keep them out of the paint a little bit, and Green bombs them 7 for 7 from the three-point land. That's not going to happen every night. The Thunder are finally going to get a chance to play in Oklahoma City on Sunday night. Is Game 3 a must-win? I'll ask Josh. Is Game 3 a must-win for the Thunder?
I think it has to be. I mean, just because. I mean, and honestly, just if you watch the first two games, they weren't even. It doesn't even look like they belonged on the same court. To be honest with you, I figured the Serge Ibaka injury was going to be important and going to affect them, but I don't think anyone thought it was going to affect them this much. I mean, it's just. Like you said, I mean, I think the Spurs have scored about 7,000 points in the paint in the first two games. I mean, it looks like, honestly, it looks like the Monstars playing against the Toon Squad. It's ridiculous.
At least the first half of that game.
Yeah.
I think the main thing for this series is the 52 point differential in the first two games. That's the highest of any conference final series. Funny enough, Ibaka actually got upgraded to day-to-day now.
Really?
So are they really going to try to bring him back? As far as Game 3, it's a must-win. I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle for the Thunder. I do think if they can win Game 3, I think then you give yourself a shot. If they can tie it up 2-2, then it's, we got another series, best 2 out of 3.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they'll have to win one in San Antonio. I think at this point we're just looking for a better effort from the Thunder. A lot of defensive lapses, a lot of bad rotations on defense. That I mean, the Spurs, they're just taking what the Thunder are just giving them. In the first game, it was drive to the lane. We don't have anyone to stop you, and then they overcommitted to the paint in game 2, and like you said, 7 for 7 from 3. Yeah, you're just not going to beat that. Now, mind you, the Spurs have been playing insanely hot for the past couple of weeks. So, I mean, I do expect eventually there will be some sort of drop-off, but unless the Thunder really find something coming into Game 3, this series is probably over.
I've known all season that the Thunder were a very poor perimeter defense team, and if you have to commit so much inside because of not having Ibaka, that's going to be a problem even more. And I listened to analysts talk all week about how Bill Simmons, Charles Barkley talk about how not having Ibaka against the Spurs wouldn't matter because while he's a rim protector, they're not going to score inside anyway. They're slashing guards aren't going to be as big of a problem, and I thought that was asinine because it's a team that's a poor perimeter defensive team. Having their best inside presence gone, like that is a huge deal. He's also their third leading scorer. I think the Thunder will not get swept. I can't see them getting swept. They're too talented. Durant can drop 50 for all I care if that's what it takes for them to win one game.
Yeah,
I don't think they'll get swept.
He'll get them one. I totally agree with that. I just think. I mean, if the obviously, it's not any great analytics here. If the Thunder want a chance to at least make this a series, they have to win Game 3. It's an absolute must-win.
And the question I ask is, if Ibaka's day-to-day now, then how sure were they that he was going to be out in the first place? Or are they trying to see what he can do because they're terrified of losing the series now they're down 2-0? Did you think they expected to lose by a combination of 52 points going into Game 3? I feel like maybe they are almost like, hey, can you play a little because they're losing so bad?
What can a 60 or 70% Serge Ibaka give you over what they're playing now? Is really the only thing I can think of. I mean, it's they're kind of hitting the panic button there in Oklahoma City.
For sure. Josh, do you think the Thunder get swept, or do you think they can steal one or two?
I think they get swept. Why not? I'm just gonna keep my bold prediction streak alive.
Right. I don't think it's that bold when they've lost by 50 the last two games.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that. Like when you met, what was it, like 58 points? I knew it was bad, but I didn't think it was that bad. That's a little bit less than 30 points a game.
52.
Yeah. Oh, was it?
Yeah.
So 26 points a game.
Yeah,
yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like that's not even competitive.
No, and if you watch those games. Anybody that's watched those games, it looked like 52-point differential over those games. I mean, it was just everything the Thunder tried to do just blew up in their face.
I thought in Game 1 when Perkins was in the game, he did a really good job. But I know that they can't keep their small lineup in if they have to play Perkins. And a lot of people last year, there was a lot of talk of should the Thunder amnesty Perkins. And I'm kind of glad they didn't because they need him for these matchups against teams like Memphis Grizzlies and the Houston Rockets that have those really talented big men that can score inside. And, everybody wants to criticize Tim Duncan all the time, and I don't think that makes sense because he dropped 27 on him Game 1. He can clearly still play.
Even if he is 75 years old.
I'm glad they have Perkins to help. I think the big lineup they had did a really good job when they were in, but they don't have enough scoring and they can't guard those perimeter shooters if they have their big lineup, and it's just a problem. Ibaka is such a versatile player and that he's not cemented to the ground like Perkins. He can move around, he can protect the rim, but he can also move around out there, and they miss his scoring too. Perkins isn't going to be your third leading scorer. So the Thunder are in trouble, and I feel bad for Thunder fans because, I mean, last year losing Russell Westbrook when they thought they had a real good chance of winning the championship. This year losing Serge Ibaka. At least the team is young and going to be together for a long time. But, I mean, hey, there's a possibility Russell Westbrook's not even on the Thunder next year. Some people think they don't play well together and the Thunder might try to trade him. I don't know. At least Durant is young, and he'll be here for another 10, 12, 15 years. So there's that. But I don't know.
Are you saying Westbrook to the Bulls?
No, I'm not saying Westbrook to the Bulls. We don't need him.
With Kevin Love.
Yeah.
Carmelo Anthony.
Westbrook, Rose, Carmelo, Love, Noah.
Turn off NBA 2K and let's get back to reality.
I still think Kevin Love ends up in Chicago, and if he doesn't, Carmelo Anthony definitely does. But that's neither here nor there.
He's perfect for Minnesota, though. He's white.
You know, it's funny. I was reading this article on ESPN, and it said what it was 29 trades for 29 teams. It's like what the Timberwolves could trade to every team in the league to get rid of Kevin Love and see what they could get back. And the one for Milwaukee was trade Kevin Love for the Bucks' second pick, and Milwaukee has to admit Minnesota is the best team in the NFC North. I thought that one was great. We're gonna move on a little more NBA talk. Byron Scott been rumored to be interest for the Los Angeles Lakers as their new head coach. He's coached the Hornets and the Cavaliers before. I'm going to ask Josh first. Do you think Byron Scott would be a good fit for the Lakers right now?
No, I don't, honestly. Like, he's just basically another Kobe Bryant scapegoat. I mean, say what you want about, the Cavaliers' talent level after they lost LeBron. I remember him being the head coach year after they lost LeBron, and there was a 60-point win differential. I don't care how good LeBron James is. One player isn't good enough to account for a 60-win swing. I mean, it just seems like it was just one of those, like, the Lakers needed a big name.
Do you think Mike Brown is that much better than Byron Scott, though? Because I think a lot of it does have to do with LeBron and the rest of the players they had in Cleveland, too. Not that I'm defending Byron Scott as their choice. I'll get into my reason why.
But at the same time, if you look at what was available, I don't know if there's any better options. But it's not like he's going to automatically, turn them into the championship contending team they were 3 years ago.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. The Lakers are in like a position right now where they're transitioning. And my position on Byron Scott is he was a really good coach with the Hornets. He had success. He didn't get them to any finals or anything, but he had success as the Hornets coach. Cleveland brought him in while LeBron was still there, so he was clearly a high-level coach in their eyes because they were bringing him in to coach a 60-win Cavs team. Mm-hmm. And then when the team fell apart, he had to coach significantly less talent. Still did his best. They were awful. We know. They've proven to still be awful since then. We know. Like, I'm not defending him necessarily, but I am saying, you can kind of give some benefit of the doubt there when you realize the most influential player in the NBA since Michael Jordan leaving the team the second you take it over is going to have a huge effect on how you coach and what you're left working with. Anderson Varejao was the Cavs' best player. But
I mean, that year with the Cavs too, Byron Scott with the Cavs, they weren't even competitive most of the time. They were hard to watch.
Maybe he was trying to get Kyrie Irving.
Well, he clearly didn't help. It didn't help him.
I think Scott would be a stopgap coach for the Lakers. I think it would be acknowledging that this team is not going to be competitive for a few years, and it's a guy who has experience coaching that could teach the young players some new things. He would obviously not be there with the intention of winning a championship with Byron Scott. I think there are better paths you can go down. Yeah. But I think right now,
but everything you just said about Byron Scott, you could have said about the last coach too.
Yeah.
So it's all going to come down to it's all going to come down to basically what does Kobe want.
I can see Scott being there for 2 years while they transition, and then moving on to a bigger name coach like Mark Jackson or Brian Shaw or somebody like that.
Billy Donovan.
Shut up.
John Calipari.
Not leaving Florida, guys. He doesn't want to. There's not a job in the NBA you could give him and then he would take over.
But I'd imagine, though, the Lakers, being one of the most storied franchises in the NBA, and, hey, money talks.
I mean, Florida can match close to almost what any NBA franchise can give him.
Yeah, but it's also
one of those a lot to coach there, and you don't have to worry about ruining your legacy by going to the NBA and bombing. It's a lot easier when you stay in college and you have a good program and you just keep getting good recruits all the time and just keep winning. But I think he's happy.
But you could argue that him not winning a title or even making it to a Final Four since 2007 could damage his legacy too.
Nah, he's fine. I'll give you a reason why he won't leave. Remember when the Orlando job was offered to him? Lots of money, lots of power, inheriting a good team, and he turned it down to stay in Florida. And then Stan Van Gundy ended up being better for the Magic than Donovan would have been. So power to him. And Donovan ended up having more success with Florida. So he's not leaving, Josh. Get over it.
Whatever you say. Yeah, and they said Peyton Manning would never not play for the Colts. That's true.
Yeah, or Brad Stevens would never leave Butler.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone ever said that. He's doing a good job in Boston, by the way. But,
yeah.
Randy, what do you think about Byron Scott as the Lakers potential replacement?
My opinion is more on the Lakers franchise overall. I mean, everyone talks about it's up to Kobe. It's up to Kobe. How much Kobe do you really have left? How much longer do you hang on to him? Because we're getting to the point now to where can he really carry a franchise anymore? And this is not a knock. He's going to still be able to play, no doubt about it. But, I mean, you think you're going to hire this coach who's going to be there longer than Kobe is going to be left in the league. I mean, because, next year very well may be Kobe's last season with the Lakers or in the NBA at all. So, I mean, I look at it to where I think if you're the Lakers in this point, I think you do start building that program now, even though you have Kobe for the last 2 years, because, I mean, unless they can pull off a massive deal, which they don't have the cap space for, then they're really not going to make a legitimate run. They'll be back in the playoffs next year with Kobe back, but, I mean, do we really see them getting past the Spurs or the Thunder or anything like that? I think a good pick for the Lakers, a coach, Iowa State, Fred Hoiberg. He's been kind of talked about in a couple of jobs. He was talked about for the Pistons before Stan Van Gundy went there. Good college coach. I think he's the type of guy to go into a program similar to how Brad Stevens is in Boston now, this storied franchise at the lowest point, build it up. I think if you're the Lakers, I think you trade the pieces you have, you try to get draft picks, or, if you want to try to at least stay competitive with Kobe, get younger players that you can build up. But, I mean, the whole thing of, well, what's Kobe going to think? Kobe's not going to be there that much longer. And when Kobe comes back, is he going to really be Kobe-like that we've used to seeing for the past 15 years or so?
I think it's a good call. I think that you want to get a college coach in there. College coaches are good at developing players. Obviously, they do it for 4 years with the same group of guys. I think that would be a really good look. You don't have to spend a lot or have a lot of commitment to a college coach. I don't think your fan base is going to get up in the arms over that. And I think Brad Stevens had a lot of success. You don't have to worry about the college coaches. You don't have to worry about those coaches who are too afraid of leaving too. You don't have to worry like Calipari, Donovan. Those guys aren't realistic. You reach
I think
for
Calipari is, honestly.
Do you think Calipari would leave?
Yeah, especially because I'd imagine. But I think about the Pete Carroll thing too with the NFL. He's gonna come. I think Calipari will leave for the NBA once he knows the hammer's coming down in Kentucky.
I could see that because you're talking about Pete Carroll. Yeah, Pete Carroll left when it was time for Pete Carroll to go because he was going from USC anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also was the only difference would be when he left USC, they hadn't won a national championship in 4 or 5 years, somewhere in there. So so it was kind of USC fans were getting really uneasy with him. But at the same time, every coach we've talked about, they have no broadcasting experience.
Yeah.
Is that the in vogue thing to do now?
Apparently.
Yeah, apparently once you put on that headset, you're smarter than you were before, I suppose.
All right, I'm interviewing for the Laker job.
Go get it.
Slightly off topic.
Yeah.
How impatient do fans get nowadays?
From a fan.
Sorry, go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
Way too impatient. Also, going back to what he kind of mentioned, the being more intelligent. Also, at least from a fan perspective, because I mean, when I'm pardoned to continue NFL examples, but when John Gruden got fired back in 2009, he wasn't no NFL team, no fans were really banging the table for him to come, be their coach. But now that he's been on ESPN the last few years, every fan seems to think he's Bill Walsh all of a sudden.
It creates buzz, and that's fun. That's fun for the fans to talk about. We got this guy. But does that really help you in the X's and O's? And personally, I think Gruden can be a good coach once he gets, and I think it's eventual. He'll get back in the NFL, but he's still going to be the same guy he was with the Bucs and with the Raiders.
The only thing with the Gruden thing is just how much has the NFL evolved since 2009?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder. That's just the only question I have. I'm not going to say he can't. I'm just kind of just. Yeah, that's a whole different.
One thing for Gruden, he loves his quarterbacks, and this is more of a quarterback league than it's ever been. So.
Yeah, but too bad he can never find one.
Yeah, he can. He has 4 or 5. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but also, I will say this about John Gruden: he's never met a quarterback he doesn't like.
It's true.
He collects them like trading cards.
Yeah.
I have one thing I was going to get out before. how impatient are fans nowadays when we're saying, oh, we haven't won a championship in 7 years is like a detriment to a coach or a team. Like, there are teams out there that have not won a championship in 60 years or never won a championship.
Or haven't played in a championship.
Or haven't been to the playoffs in 30 years, like stuff like that. How impatient is that when you're like a USC fan and you're like, oh, we haven't won since 2005, I'm mad.
I think it just depends on the team, and because also it gets to a point when this is going to sound really bad, but it gets to the point where some fan bases, Boston sports fans in particular, they feel almost entitled that when they don't win for the Patriots. Last time the Patriots won is 2005, and they almost feel entitled that every year they don't win the Super Bowl or NBA Finals or whatever. It's not their fault. It's every other team's fault.
Yeah.
My dad's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. They haven't made the playoffs in the last 2 years, and he literally acts like the sky is falling every year.
There are fan bases like that where it's just like they almost feel entitled to things, and when they win, you have to bow down to them. But when they lose, it's every excuse in the book.
I swear, I hear every year 14-2, 15-1, winning the Super Bowl every year, year, and if it doesn't happen. Well, it's like the excuses just pour out.
Or like what was it, the thing with the Chargers and the Chiefs this last year with the field goal or something?
God,
yeah. I think you have your delusional fan bases out there. I was listening to a Bulls podcast early in the season, and they were talking about expecting a championship. There was one of the bloggers was going off on a rant about how he pays his money to go, and he expects to see this and he expects to see that, and it's like every team has fans that pay money to go to these games. And
I was going to mention, like every fan base, even pick some mid-major market team. Bobcats, they probably have at least a few delusional fans that quote unquote expect things like that too. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely, and I think the patience of the fan bases. I think if your team is not doing well, I think you have to take solace in, okay, are they building towards something?
Yes.
You look at we'll look at the Cavs, for instance. They have number one pick. You have Kyrie Irving. Can you somehow keep him? Can you maybe trade that pick? There's talk of maybe that number one pick going for Kevin Love. If you're a Cavs fan, can you look at it and say, okay, it's bad now, but the future looks better? I don't think there's a lot of Cavs fans coming out of the woodwork saying championship or bust next year, or we haven't been to the playoffs in 5 years, and suddenly I'm not a fan anymore. I think if you look at it, and like one of you guys said earlier, it varies fan base to fan base. I'm a Pacers guy. They've never won an NBA championship. They won ABA championships decades before I was born. And I've often sat around and thought about, so what am I going to root for after they win a title? It's just kind of one of those things where
it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, kind of the analogy I use is like as a kid on Christmas. When you're a kid, you're waiting for Christmas, for like months or weeks, or whatever it is, and then once it's there, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Now what?
What's next?
I think it varies fan base to fan base, really, and every team has their delusional fans. Go ahead. And also from fan base to fan, I think also might have to do with age also, because I'd say the Boston fan base I mentioned too, or even Oregon football. If Oregon football fans or Boston sports fans that are 23, 24, they've known nothing but winning. But I imagine that the older generation of fans they're probably a lot more appreciative and they have a lot more perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say on the Cavs thing, I don't think if you're actually like a legitimate Cavs fan, I don't think you can be upset about the last 15 years of Cleveland Cavaliers basketball at all. You got years and years of LeBron James going to the finals, going to the playoffs, all this stuff you never expected. You got to have the best player in the world play for your team. There's still rumors of him coming back. They have Kyrie Irving. They've won the lottery 3 times in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
How can you be mad? I don't even think they get to be mad about Anthony Bennett. I think you just have to chalk that one up to you finally had some bad luck, Cleveland.
And I still think it's too early to kind of judge Anthony Bennett, to be fair.
That's fair, yeah. Give him a couple more years, but that definitely looks like it fell on their face a lot.
Yeah,
when
I
you
do
look
agree.
at Kyrie, they hit 2 points a game at one point last year, right, at most of the season.
Hey, those are Serge Ibaka numbers.
Yeah.
Old Serge Ibaka numbers. But, I don't know. I think it depends on what your franchise is. Like with Chicago, I'll admit I'm I've been patient the last couple of years, and like I'm getting to where I feel like every year we should be trying to win an NBA championship. That's how close we are. I think it depends on what position your franchise is in. If you're in a position where you've got cap room, you've got talent, you've been there recently, you want to win now. I think there are probably 6 teams at least that should be saying every year should be the expectation should be title. You know, the Pacers, the Heat, the Thunder, the Spurs, the Bulls. There's probably more than 6. The Rockets, those few teams should all be expecting right now to win. That should be the goal every year. There's certain teams that would like be happy to make the playoffs. You can say all 30 teams will want to win the championship, but we know certain teams it's more realistic than other ones. Yeah. I think that depends on what your team is.
There's also a certain fan base that would just love to have a fucking team.
I weep for you every day, Josh. We're gonna move on to some NFL kind of related talk. The Falcons broke ground on a new stadium this week. It is a $1.2 billion stadium, estimated cost. Should be built by the start of the 2017 season, and will also house an unnamed Atlanta expansion soccer team. So, so I'm sure Josh is excited about that. Maybe in a few years we'll be talking about Atlanta getting a Super Bowl, since they love to give new teams will reward the cities that build new stadiums with a Super Bowl. That is the perfect segue for Minneapolis winning the bid for the Super Bowl in 2018. They beat out New Orleans, who was a perfect 10 for 10 in Super Bowl bids over their time. That's because they have an old stadium. Maybe the Saints need to build a new stadium. I don't know. They want to start getting.
I think part of the reason though that the Saints had hosted so many Super Bowls might have had to do with just the New Orleans atmosphere.
You'd much rather be in New Orleans in February than Minneapolis, of course.
Exactly. And also, I mentioned new stadiums. Indianapolis. I mean, Lucas Oil Stadium is. I don't know the exact. I know it's a really new stadium. I don't know the exact year. I think 2007, somewhere in there.
It's pretty new.
Yeah,
and they had one. They had one fairly recently. I think this 100% was just they wanted to reward Minnesota for finally building the team in a new.
And then with the new Meadowlands.
Absolutely, yeah. Look at the past few years. I mean, 2018 got awarded to the new Vikings Stadium. 2016 is Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, where the Niners will play. This past year was MetLife Stadium. 2012 was Lucas Oil Stadium. 2011, the Cowboys Stadium. Go back to 2006, Ford Field, when they built a new stadium. Other than, pretty much your, Phoenix, Miami, and New Orleans rotations.
Yeah, those are just appealing
stadiums. Yeah. Those are regular rotations just because of tradition. They've had quite a few games there. But outside of those rotations, it's all been awarding new stadiums.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm really excited about the prospect of let's say AP is still in his prime, and then in the last few years, maybe 2018 could be his last year of greatness. Teddy Bridgewater, coming in Minnesota. If the Vikings are playing in the Super Bowl in 2018, I will drop the money to go and see the game in Minnesota, because winning your first Super Bowl in front of your hometown fans would be amazing.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
Also, one thing is that the whole home team stadium thing. To be fair, the 49ers did play in a Super Bowl in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
That's close to a home, game as they
pretty
can
close, yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
What shot were you going to take at the Vikings, Randy?
Oh, I was going to say, if the Vikings are in the Super Bowl in 2018 and Adrian Peterson still plays, I'll pay for you to go to the Super Bowl.
But I mean, that sounds crazy now, but think back to 3-4 years ago, if people would have said, the Seahawks in, say, 2010, or 2011, whatever year the 7 and 9 year was, if people would have said in 2014 the Seahawks will win the Super Bowl, people would look at you like you were crazy.
I'll give you this. All right. So in today's NFL, it's not that hard to turn around. The Chiefs went from worst to being a playoff team. 5 years ago, we were in the NFC Championship game, and 4 years from now, I'm saying maybe we could be in the Super Bowl. Like, the turnaround from really good team to really bad team isn't that drastic. I don't think that it would be that.
And then in that same period, look how a team like teams like the Steelers have fallen.
Mm-hmm. The Texans.
Yeah. For every team that rises, one has to fall. Yeah, absolutely with the Steelers.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a huge argument against Minnesota getting the talent in there. They're already rebuilding the defense. I mean, you could see it. I don't know.
I mean, they've had about 43 first-round draft picks the last 5 years.
Yeah, Spielman makes those moves.
Yeah, he does. He's like the honey badger. Yeah, the one thing also I would say that just with building new stadiums, but then you also look at all the stadiums like Lambeau Field, Seahawks Quest Field, CenturyLink Field. I don't know what the fuck it's called anymore. They've recently made renovations and all these stadiums have made, and Miami's made renovations and I mean, how many of these that we didn't build a new stadium, but we've completely renovated it. Like I think Lambeau Field a year or two ago put I think it was 18,000 more seats in. I mean, that should be appealing too to a lesser extent, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and Houston getting the 2017 Super Bowl with the formerly Reliant Stadium, now Energy Stadium, where they went through a massive multi-million-dollar renovation as well, and they got a Super Bowl out of it.
Yeah, and also just from a this might be just the football historian nerd in me, but how cool would a Super Bowl in Lambeau Field be?
It would be horrible. I would not go. Shut up.
I mean, or even like Soldier Field or Gillette or some Heinz Field. Something that I think just from a history standpoint would be really cool.
Heinz Field's not that cool.
Well, I believe that having it in MetLife Stadium probably opened that Pandora's box for outdoor stadiums now.
Yeah.
There was a big worry last year, though, with the weather delaying the Super Bowl game possibly and stuff, like people being able to get there.
And it was like 58 degrees, which I think helps a lot of these, Green Bay, Chicago, Seattle, a lot of these, the quote-unquote colder area climate teams. But I'm kind of upset, too, because I want it to be like a blizzard.
Josh, I'll give you this question. All right, so football fans, maybe they'd want to go to Green Bay to see a game, sure. What regular person is going to want to go to Wisconsin, though? Like, to enjoy a game.
What regular person can afford to go to the Super Bowl?
Oh, no, actually, way more regular, money-hungry people go to the Super Bowl than, like, actual football fans, honestly. Like, the Super Bowl, when it was in Tampa, there was tons of people that were just people with money that just went to go. Like, for the parties and stuff. There weren't actually a lot of football.
But I mean, a lot of people will basically use it as business trips anyway.
Yeah.
Wow, I want to be in that business.
Right? Yeah, right? I'm about to talk to my boss.
Yeah.
In 2008, when the Super Bowl was in Tampa and I lived in Florida, it was the Steelers and the Cardinals. I heard they had a lot of extra seats, and in order to make sure that part of the camera side wasn't empty, they got desperate enough at the end to give away 200 tickets to the Super Bowl that part of the.
Oh man.
Yeah, and if we'd known, we would have gone. Obviously, fuck, I don't care who's playing in it.
And then there's also the case with when it was in Dallas where weren't they selling? I think I heard something about they were selling tickets to basically watch the game on the jumbotron in the parking lot.
Yeah, they had the opposite problem. They had some temporary seats that had to be removed because they weren't up to code spec. So that was Jerry Jones, man. Just
yeah. I can remember exactly. I remember hearing about that or something.
That's horrible for the people that.
Yeah,
I'd have been mad.
Oh, I would have been furious. All right. Well, we're gonna lead on to some NHL playoff talk. The NHL playoffs are going on right now, and I'm gonna defer to you, Josh. Take the reins on that one.
All right. Well, first, might as well start off with just talking about the Western Conference Final, just because it's the first one that shows up on my screen. The series right now is tied. I'm not reading like a Japanese person, It's tied 1-1. The Blackhawks and the Kings. Ironically, the last two Stanley Cup champions. The game 2. I don't know if either of you guys watched it, but it was pretty awesome. With after the Blackhawks built a quick 2-0 lead. The Kings seem like they do this a few times every year. They rattled off 6 unanswered goals to tie up the series 1-1. I mean,
that's crazy.
Yeah, I would say, just because I know you're not a big hockey fan, Chris, it'd be the example. I would say it's about the equivalent of that the comeback the Colts made in the playoffs this year. I mean,
oh no, that's absurd. Like, if I was watching a hockey game and the team scored 6 straight goals to win it, I'd be excited too, even though I don't like hockey. Like, that's crazy.
I mean, I'd say maybe 1 or 2. I think the last goal or 2 was a little fluky, but still, 6 freaking goals is 6 goals.
Yeah. You gotta remember, my first experience with hockey was that Flyers Rangers game. It was it was 1-1 the entire game, and then towards the end they scored, and it was just very anticlimactically over, and I'm like, okay.
And these are what I'd say were two. You could really make a legitimate case for these being the 2 best teams in hockey right now. And I going into the series, going into the playoffs, I said the Blackhawks were the favorites. But I mean, with Jonathan Quick, for as much, just like most goalies, he seems to be very up and down. But when he's on, he's almost impossible to get a puck past.
Absolutely. I mean, the NHL playoffs have shown us a hot goalie, playing hot at the right time, like we talked about in the NFL, can mean everything. Now, as far as I agree with you. I think the Blackhawks and the Kings series, I think whoever moves on, I think that's your Stanley Cup champion. I think those are the two best teams in the league. But I still, I'm not sold on the Kings completely. I mean, the 6 goals, there was a little flukiness to it. Yeah. But, I mean, when you watch those games, Chicago still controlled the tempo and flow of those games. I mean, Marian Hossa, he's got 13 points in 14 games, and the best thing about it is he's not having to do it all anymore. It's not just him. Mikkel's been playing fantastic for him as well. I still think Chicago wins the series.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, I would say, like I mentioned that Jonathan Quick, I think it's hard to argue that he's the best, not the best goalie in the league right now. But I just think as a whole, the Blackhawks with just they play, I think, of the 4 teams left, I think they play best as a unit. But they've also, I think also they have the experience of playing in high pressure situations. They won a Stanley Cup this last year. They won one back in 2009, 2010. Granted, that team got blown up, but this team, they have playoff experience. I'm not saying that the Kings don't, but they are team they see, and just watching even throughout that onslaught that the Kings threw at them, it didn't seem like it got to be too much for them. Like onslaught like this might have been for another team.
Yeah, I still think the Blackhawks still have that poise of the champion that we always talk about.
Yeah,
I still look at them and I don't see it going much more than 6 games for the Blackhawks.
Right. Yeah, me too. I have the same thing. Like going into the series, I thought the Blackhawks in 6. Just because, also, do you think that maybe the first 2 rounds against, ironically, 2 teams from California, the Kings had to go 7 games? I think. I mean, this kind of sounds like cookie cutter hockey analysis, but the 14 games before the conference finals, that's going to wear on a team eventually. Yeah,
Chicago got through their 2 rounds. I think both series were 6 games, so 2 less games, and I mean, we're talking in the same period of time there. I mean, that does wear on you. It does have an effect, and definitely, especially for the Kings having to travel across the country. Now the Blackhawks have to travel back as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's somewhat of an equalizer, but I mean, you just look at it, and all the signs just point to the Blackhawks here.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at just like, and their scoring, if you look at just one thing I really like about the Blackhawks too is that they have different guys that could score at different times. They have Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane. They have 3 or 4 guys that you can legitimately see score a hat trick every night. And sometimes it's just what were you saying?
I was absolutely, that's what you're saying. I mean, we've discussed this series for how many minutes now without even mentioning Patrick Kane. I mean, that's the danger of the Blackhawks there. That with Hossa and Toews and Patrick Kane, those guys can beat you in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Whereas with the Kings, I mean, they're still a great team, and I thought Anze Kopitar, there really isn't one scorer that really scares you. I mean, but just like with Quick, when he's on, he's hard to stop. But similar to the Sidney Crosby thing, when you can get into his head a little bit, and you can just kind of rough him up a little bit, his psyche, can be messed with a little bit.
That's where he needs a better number 2 scorer with him, I believe.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then like I mentioned, we mentioned earlier, with Martin Hossa taking 54 shots on goal throughout the playoff of the series. I mean, the next, let me see, I think it's Marian. I'm going to butcher this, but for the Kings, Marian Gaborik. I do apologize. I'm not adept in these Russian names. Is the next leading shot taker with 46 shots. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but but in terms of hockey, that 9 shots is an awful lot.
Yeah.
And then I think so. You had you said Blackhawks in 6, correct?
That's how I see it. I could see the Kings picking off one more game at home, but I don't see much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, over the last few years has really shown that especially when the Kings are when the Kings fans can get Staples Center rocking, that's one of the toughest places to play in all the NHL.
They're burning off all that energy from the Lakers season.
Yeah, hey, they have to,
Yeah, they got to get people in Staples Center somehow.
Yeah. And then I think also for them too, some fans just love wearing black. I mean, that might sound a little like just kind of naive, but that's one of those things. Fans just love wearing black.
Yeah. How many of those are Raiders jerseys turned inside out?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Yeah, if you wanted maybe just now, I mean, yeah, like I think
is the Eastern Conference Finals going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the New York Rangers and the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
If you want to maybe just start off with give your thoughts on the series as a whole.
It's been, I mean, I think the Rangers win the series, but I mean, this is almost like watching the third place round. I mean, I don't want to say that, you know, and the Canadians, they're probably kind of happy to be there. I could see no, I can't. I see the Rangers moving on, but I don't see them beating either Los Angeles or Chicago.
Why is that? What is holding the Rangers back from being able to overtake either of those teams in the West?
The goalkeeping has been suspect all year, and that's one of those things. You know, like the NFL, you have to have good defense to win in the playoffs. In the NHL, you have to have good goaltending, and it's been suspect all year. Now they just lost Stepan with a broken jaw. He's probably going to be out at least the rest of the series, probably for the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just too many things are coming against them. And like I said, they'll probably I still pick them to win, but like I said, this series just doesn't have the drama that the Kings and the Blackhawks have. That series is good enough. People that don't watch hockey, I would tell you, watch these teams play. They play them the right way. They play hard. And, you know, the Rangers Canadiens series, it just doesn't quite have that zest. You know, almost compare it to the Pacers Heat series and the Spurs Thunder series. The Pacers and Heat has that buzz about them.
And then there's a history.
Definitely that too. But this other series, it's just kind of
Well, listening to you talk about the Blackhawks and the Kings series, and it sounded like you both pretty much feel like Chicago should definitely win the series. They seem like a significantly better team, and that you said yourself that the other series kind of like they're just playing it out for third place. So I mean, does that kind of underwhelm you a little bit that one team seems to be significantly better than the others? And I feel like at least in the NBA, where you could make a case for San Antonio or Miami or maybe even Indiana to all have a chance of winning the title this year, and whereas it just seems like it's almost a shoo-in that Chicago is going to win.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. I think it's just what he was kind of talking about is just similar to just with the NBA Conference Finals, where I think what helps too is what makes the Western Conference Finals for me at least so compelling is that the two teams are polar opposites in a way. I mean, the Blackhawks historically have been a team that they're a high-flying team that they'll score a ton of goals, whereas the Kings are the exact opposite. They kind of relied on Jonathan Quick when they won the Cup 2 years ago to kind of just they won a lot of games 2-1, whereas the Blackhawks are going to beat you 6-4. It's kind of one of those just like strength versus strength battles.
I feel like I can get behind the Blackhawks.
Yeah,
sound like I can get behind them.
Yeah, and also they're not from LA. And also for all the talk about Jonathan Quick, being the best goalie in the league for good reason. Corey Crawford's no slouch either. They've won a ton of playoff games off of his glove.
Yeah.
And then like just the Eastern Conference Finals, the games have been great, and I think the Canadians and the Rangers are two evenly matched teams. One thing I do love about watching Montreal is just they're that team that every few years in the NHL comes along where they're just hungry, and they're basically one of those teams that, for lack of a better term, they don't know any better. They don't know they're not supposed to be able to hang with these guys. That's why I think if they could somehow get past the Rangers, I don't think they will. I think if they could somehow get past the Rangers, they can push either the Blackhawks or the Kings. And
that's what I was talking about earlier. As much as I want to see Montreal move on, it does kind of have that they're happy to be. It seems like they've kind of reached what their goal was for the year, it just seems like they're just kind of like, all right, we made it this far because I mean they're still a relatively young team.
Yeah.
So
I kind of look at them too a similar way that I looked at the Wild going into the second round where. Just getting to the second round was the Wild Stanley Cup, and this is the same thing with Montreal. Exactly. Just getting to the conference finals is they're I think in the next 2 or 3 years, those are going to be 2 teams to really watch out for, especially if they can keep this core group together and keep building.
Yeah, that on the Minnesota Wild, that's an excellent observation, and it really was, because for them that's a franchise that struggled to even at times even be competitive. But I mean, it shows that they're at least building towards something. I mean, you have your powerhouses in the NHL that are starting to fall off. I mean, the Red Wings this year, that obviously was a disappointing finish to the season. Yeah. And hopefully it does. I think a little more parity could really help the NHL overall.
Yeah. I do agree. I think that's also one thing that I think that way that they could potentially capitalize on just some of the I mean, with all due respect, every year going into the NBA season, there's usually 5 or 6 teams that people think have a legitimate shot at winning it all. But then if you look at the other 3 main sports, the NHL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball, they each have it's always that wide open, especially with the NHL. Every year, you never know. Like 2 years ago, who'd have thought the Kings would have really boat raced their way to the Stanley Cup, or the Blackhawks the year before last year?
Yeah, you're exactly right. But and it just shows we were talking about. A goalkeeper playing hot at the right time can propel you to a championship. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of look at it just with the NFL. There was that streak with like Joe Flacco and Eli Manning where they just got hot at the right time and just
exactly.
They were once you get hot, you're unstoppable. Or LeBron the last couple years in the playoffs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who'd you say? You said you have the Rangers, and how many games was that?
I have Rangers in 6, Blackhawks in 6. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Blackhawks win it in 5, and then I see the Blackhawks winning the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, like I have to say, like I have the Blackhawks in 6. But that's not to say that I do see that I don't see very many, if any, more games in the series turning into these 6-2 blowouts. I see a lot of I see the Blackhawks winning in 6. A lot of them just 3-4, 5-3 type games, and I also see. Yeah. As much as my heart wants to see the Canadians make it to the Stanley Cup finals, I just don't see that happening. I see the Rangers winning in 6 as well.
The Rangers are just a better team, but they're not as good as the Kings or the Blackhawks.
And I see the Blackhawks winning in 6 as well.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people were saying that the Rangers wouldn't even get past the Penguins. So the fact that they've gotten up there too is another thing.
Yeah.
It's another thing for them. It's beneficial to them, so that's good.
Yeah, they're kind of the little underdog thing as well. Mm-hmm. And also, because I'll be honest, I didn't think that they were going to be able to stop Sidney Crosby like they did.
Mm-hmm. No.
I don't think. And that's another example too of where I'd say with the NHL, like for as good as Alexander Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby are, these scorers are stoppable. But when Corey Crawford, Jonathan Quick, pick whatever goal you want. Once they're on this, it's hard to break their psyche.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you have Blackhawks in 6 and Rangers in 6. Josh, you have Blackhawks in 6 and Rangers in how many games?
I think I see this going 7 games, but I think the Rangers pull it out in Game 7.
Okay. Well, you guys, we have a unanimous Chicago and New York Stanley Cup final. So that should be worth looking out for. Do you happen to have the dates of the next games on hand?
Yeah, I believe the Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals, I want to say, is tomorrow, and Game 4. Yeah. And I believe the Rangers are up 2-1 in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's on Sunday. I just don't happen to have times off top on hand right now.
Well, you can check that out on ESPN.com. I'm sure you guys will find it.
Yeah. Game 3 for the Kings Blackhawks is tomorrow night at 8. And like you said, Game 4 of the Canadians and Rangers is Sunday at 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. NBC Sports. Check local listings.
Randy carrying the team. All right. We're going to move on back to some NFL talk. The Cleveland Browns, everybody's been talking about their new quarterback, Johnny Manziel.
I've heard of him.
I have too, right? I hear he's a really thirsty guy. He really likes water. The front office has been saying they've been kind of putting poor Johnny down a little bit, trying to keep him in line. What do you think about how the Browns have been handling the Manziel situation so far, Randy?
I think, I think they're trying to constantly remind him that, hey, he is a rookie. I think that that by saying, okay, he's third on the depth chart, he's behind Brian Hoyer because he's Brian Hoyer. I like the way they've played it. They've tried to keep him out of the media as much as they can. They kept cameras out of the rookie mini camp. I think they're just trying to let let us see Johnny Manziel, the football player, and not Johnny Football, the ESPN star.
Right.
Yeah, and also one thing also on top of that, there was a quote from Joe Thomas I saw on ESPN basically saying that rookies are supposed to be seen and not heard, and that's
Absolutely.
coming from, all-pro left tackle, probably one of the undisputed leaders on that team. So I mean, I think I kind of look at this similarly to the way way back in the day with Joe Namath when he first came to New York from Alabama, where he was the big star, and they kind of were trying to hush him up as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that they're playing it fine. I think that you want there to be an air of belief that there's going to be a competition at the position between him and Hoyer. I do think Manziel starts week 1. I think that he's obviously the better quarterback. I don't think that's a knock on Hoyer, but I think there's a.
But Brian Hoyer's played all of 4 games in his career.
Yeah, I think people reacted a little bit to how decent he played before he got hurt last year. That was what it was. He played decent before he got hurt.
And with Josh Gordon and Jordan Cameron, I could look decent.
Yeah, I think Manziel starts the season. I think they have to give that belief that there's going to be a competition at the position.
What I will say though about this whole situation is just the way everything is kind of turned out. First of all, to be honest with you, I'm sick of hearing about it and reading about it and talking about it. But I get why
it's going to keep happening. They're going to talk
about it. Like I will say, I see this is one of those things where, from a playing standpoint, I don't see that there aren't too many similarities between him and Tim Tebow besides them being running quarterbacks in the SEC that won Heisman's. The media the media coverage is flirting with Tebow territory already. Just with far as just when I remember, I think I've told the story on the show already. When the night after the draft, Johnny Manziel was the headline on CNN.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Michael Sam stuff would have been on CNN, that would have been one thing, but it was ridiculous. But I also, I've mentioned this before, it's already starting to seem like the Vince Young in Tennessee situation where the coaching staff and the football people didn't want Vince Young, but the ownership wanted Vince Young. Just like there's the story about basically Jimmy Haslam supposedly calling an audible in the draft room saying we're not taking Bridgewater, we're taking Manziel. It just seems like he's more of an ownership guy than a football guy in the coach's mind.
I don't want to take a shot at Manziel and make it sound like they didn't draft him because I think he's a good football player. I think they did a study. It said Bridgewater was the best quarterback. They went against it because they didn't think Manziel would still be there. I don't know. I think. What
I'll also say too about the Manziel thing, the way he was drafted was really weird. I mean, they passed on him 3 times. I mean, it seems a little odd.
Maybe they knew they could get him later. I feel like.
Yeah, I felt like it was a smart pick where they picked him up at. And let's face it, Manziel puts butts in the seats.
Yeah, but you know what puts butts in the seats? Go 12-4.
You don't know whether or not they can go 12-4 in a few years with him. I don't think you can expect that this season, especially without Josh Gordon. But I think that
with Josh Gordon,
I think give him a couple of years, and I think we'll see. I think he has the highest ceiling of any player in the draft.
I believe that too.
But also think about this with Manziel and the whole be patient thing. They also think about it like this: if you go back and look at just how impatient teams have gotten with players. I mean, there's already talks about the Bills not being sold on EJ Manuel, who was a first-round pick last year, just because he wasn't Andrew Luck.
I thought Manuel was really good.
So I really wondered,
and I hate Florida State players. And I thought Manuel was really
good. I thought he played fine, but there's the talks with or even To be honest with you, all things considered, I didn't think Christian Ponder has played terribly.
He wasn't that good.
He wasn't terrible.
He always had his things that were going to hold him down. He's got a good future as a backup quarterback in the league.
But I mean, it's just one of those things. But think about it, the same thing probably could have been said at the same point in Troy Aikman's career.
Yeah.
This is where I stand on the Manziel thing. Why they switched off Bridgewater to him and whatnot. I think when you're drafting, especially later in the first round like that, I think you take prospects before players that play right now. Because when you're in a position like a team like Cleveland is, you're building for the future. That's what teams that need the draft build for.
They've been doing that for a freaking decade.
Okay, well, that's a shot against Cleveland itself and not necessarily Manziel. I think you draft prospects.
No, I'm not taking a shot at Manziel. I'm just saying it was just the way the draft. Like, I feel if you really believe in a quarterback, it shouldn't matter where you're picking. Make sure you get him.
Well, then maybe they believe in Manziel. Maybe they liked them both, and they just didn't think Manziel would be there when they picked. Bridgewater was always rumored to slip
But if they really wanted Manziel, why didn't they just take him at 4, 9, or whatever it was?
Because they knew they could get him at 26.
Yeah, he was going to be there.
Are you sure that was the one thing? It's just kind of odd the way it just played out to
me. Maybe they knew Bridgewater could be their quarterback. They wanted Manziel. Maybe Manziel was higher rated on their board, but they thought if we want Justin Gilbert, and if Bridgewater's there when we pick at 26, that's okay too.
Yeah, I think if they would have got either of those guys, they would have been happy with that. But I missed the draft show last week, but were we all not holding our collective breaths on that Cowboys pick?
I think
they would take
everyone
Manziel.
was. The internet would have broke.
The thing I'm with Dallas about is the fact that they've admitted Manziel was the highest player on their board, and they didn't draft him for the circus. You forget the circus. Since when has Jerry Jones ever cared about a circus? If he's the highest rated player on your board, you take the highest rated player on your board. Tony Romo is not going to be there forever. I absolutely would have took Manziel at that pick. Absolutely. If he's the highest player on your board at that point, you take him.
But to be fair, it's also very easy to play armchair GM. I mean,
yeah.
Yes. I don't know. I think you can't let publicists tell you who to draft. Like, you have to.
But just from the Cowboys standpoint, I don't know if taking a team that's have been 8-8 forever. I don't know if taking a potential backup quarterback with the 16th pick in the draft would have been smart. Now I don't know if I would have taken Zach Martin either. But I mean, at least that fills a need more than a quarterback would have.
Maybe Manziel is their quarterback of the future. I've heard so many Hall of Fame caliber players, Kurt Warner, Brett Favre, Steve Young, all say very positive things about Manziel, and they say
that about every quarterback prospect. It seems like.
I feel like people want to get on Manziel because they talk about him in the media. And the thing is, you got to understand, the media needs things to talk about. Otherwise, ESPN's not interesting. So if they highlight a guy and they'll talk about him, and we have to accept it. It gets annoying, sure, but that's their job. Just like it's the player's job to play.
What I'm waiting to happen is just if it does happen and he fails miserably, then to tear him down, just like with Mark Sanchez, just like with Mark Sanchez a few years ago. They love building these guys up just to tear them back down.
And for a second, I really want to give a lot of credit to Mike Peting and Ray Farmer for how well it seems they've been handling both their jobs so far. Farmer did an excellent job in the draft, and I think Peting seems like a guy who the Browns players are going to rally around as their head coach. It seems like an underrated signing almost. He got real ballsy with them. He told them if they didn't make him an offer the day of the interview, that he would go back to Buffalo. And
now I wonder if he'll get fired at the end of the year.
Cleveland wanted to wait for the Broncos offensive coordinator to get out of the Super Bowl before
Peyton Manning?
Before they made a choice. And Peting said, "No, if you want me, you want me. I'm not your second choice." And they hired him. So that takes balls. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because that's walking a razor blade right there.
I think the Browns are in a good position to be successful, just like Cleveland is. I think they have a really talented defense. A lot of people don't know about. I did think they spent some silly money this offseason, letting TJ Ward go and paying a safety I consider less good than him more money in Dante Whitner. The Dansby signing, they probably paid him a little too much, but he's still a good player. I think I would have rather kept DeQuell Jackson and T.J. Ward for the money they paid Carlos Dansby and Dante Whitner. Sounds like more like name signings than player signings.
Yeah, but at the same time, those signings, similar to what I said about the Raiders, if the Patriots make those signings, they're heralded as great.
Yeah, it's just what their track record was in the past is really.
Yeah. And just the whole the Browns have potential. I've heard that story so many times that it's lost all meaning to me. I mean,
I guess. We'll just have to see.
If it happens, it happens. But I'm not going to hold my breath.
Right. Well, I think we talked about enough about Johnny Manziel because we know ESPN will take care of plenty of that later in the week too. We're going to move on to some baseball talk. Prince Fielder is out for the season. Josh, let me know how you feel that's going to affect the Rangers' chances of being a competitive team this year.
Well, I think they've already stumbled out of the gate enough as it was. Now losing Prince Fielder, who might be I wouldn't say he is the best, but he's one of the top flight hitters in the majors right now, and not only the fact that they're losing him, but also the injury that he's sustained, the surgery he's having. That's not there's not even any guarantee that he's going to necessarily come back from that to ever be able to play again. I mean, that's something, and he's not exactly a spring chicken.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Yeah, the like you said, the Rangers have stumbled. They're already 7 games back, And not only is it they lost Prince Fielder, they lost, I skipped my mind, the guy they traded for Prince Fielder who's now in Detroit. So, I mean, and it's not just fielders. They've already had 14 guys go on the DL so far this season, and we're only 47 games in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see any meaningful recovery for the Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think they'll be lucky to be able to fight for that second wild card spot at the end of the regular season. I mean,
I'm really glad baseball did that, by the way, adding that second wild card spot. That was something I felt for a long time they needed to do. Add another.
Yeah. And also, I also like the way that they implemented just the way it's one game instead of a full series, like a lot of people thought it was going to be. That I honestly would not have been a fan of, but just the way it's really, it kind of gives it that wild card around that NFL type of atmosphere to it, where it's like one game, whatever happens.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, when things like the infield fly happen, it's a horror show.
Yeah.
I really say too that really because I mean in that division it's really I think about it really it's Oakland and then everybody else. Just really gives every other shot and every other team in that division a legitimate shot at a wild card spot now.
Yeah, because I mean the Angels are in second right now. They're 3.5 games out. I mean Albert Pujols is finally starting to play like Albert Pujols again. Mm-hmm. So I mean, Seattle. I mean, do we really see Seattle as a contender yet?
No.
I mean,
I'm a Mariners fan, but I do not think that they'll be contending for a wild card spot this year. I'll be completely honest.
No.
I'm as optimistic as possible, but for them, winning 75 games is going to be a successful year.
Yeah, with the roster they have, yeah.
Yeah, they're I think they're a team that's I'd say 2 or 3 years away from being a legitimate contender.
I could agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Depending on health and trade and potential trades and whatnot, but
yeah. It seems like as soon as they start to find success, they blow it up and back to mediocrity again. So if they can build around some guys and hopefully it can develop a little bit faster, than like they did with Ichiro, I could see them being competitive.
Yeah, and the good thing is now it seems like they have better management and front office now than they did because I don't know how many times as a Mariners fan there were so many head scratching decisions they made.
I think if you're a fan of a franchise like that, it's what we went back to as far as the patience of a fan base. I think if you have faith in your ownership and your general managers and things like that, I think fans, if they could see stability and if they could see improvement, I think that's what garners patience. And when you don't have those things, when it's a revolving door and a bad move after bad move, I think that's when some of that fan rebellion begins to kick in.
Yeah, and similar like I mentioned with the moves they made this offseason with Robinson Cano, which I think was probably the biggest single move in baseball period in the offseason, with Corey Hart and just the other little pieces that they added. It showed to me that at least because for years they were kind of looked at as one of those teams that they would scrape the bargain bin for free agents, and they do that. And this showed to me, even if say this year they fail miserably and end up 15, 20 games into 500, I say, hey, at least they're giving it a shot and trying to get better. They tried.
Because everyone knocked them. Oh, they overpaid for Cano. Well, they had to.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. When you're a team like Seattle, Houston, these bottom barrel teams, you have to throw more money than a lot of these players are really worth, and that's across the board in sports. Period. I mean, we go back to the Browns thing. To get players to go to the Browns, you have to overpay them or the Raiders or insert your historical loser here. I mean, you have to overpay for him, and if Cano doesn't work out, I'm gonna be mad as a fan just that they paid him at all, not that they overpaid for him.
Yeah, it at least shows that they're trying.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the Astros, and I think he's making more money himself than the Astros are making as a whole.
Yeah, the Astros is just Travis Schumachery at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, where like there's the Moneyball approach, and there's the Houston Astros approach.
Yeah, let's not pay people very much and then expect to. I mean, but I would have trouble if I were an Astros fan even going to a game. Like, why? Why would you?
Yeah, because similar to me, like for years from the Mariner fan standpoint, there were points when I can tell that the last few years, especially was 2008 to about 2011, I can tell they weren't even trying to put a competitive baseball team out there.
Yeah, they just kind of packed it in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the Astros, they have a few nice pieces, but as old saying goes, how many of them are going to end up with the Yankees in a few years?
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as that contract's up, they're going to bolt for better money or a better team.
Yeah.
Probably both.
And for the Yankees, as soon as that A-Rod contract's off their books, they're going to go back to being the old Steinbrenner Yankees.
Yeah, exactly. Cashman won't let them be an economically built roster.
Yeah, no. And because for the whole, the Yankees over the last few years, I thought they did a lot. They were a lot smarter with their free agent spending, and they kind of realized that our farm system is crap. But then once that A-Rod contract and some of these other bad contracts are off of their books, I wonder if that approach will continue.
Well, I think in the MLB, I think you can sign those big players, but I think the guys that are your role players, your solid 5, 6, and 7 hitters are guys that you develop through your farm system.
Yeah, and that's the problem I think the Yankees have had the last few years, is that their farm system is non-existent.
Yeah, and they used to be able to, hey, guys 1 through 7, 1 through 8, we're all big name signings. They just can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And they can sign the big 3 or 4 guys, but the rest that they have to develop are just not there. And that's where the holes in their roster really show forth.
Yeah. I think that really kind of also shows interesting, too, that one of the big things, too, going back, I don't mean to turn this into like a Mariner segment, but one of the big things that I loved about with Robinson, one of the first things Robinson Cano said when he signed with the Mariners was that he wanted to basically rebuild a franchise more than – because he probably could have re-signed with the Yankees for – maybe a little bit less and won a few more championships, but he would have been probably the next Yankee captain. But he said he would have rather basically I think if he could somehow even just rebuild the Mariners into a contender again, that I think would do a lot more for his legacy than just being another cog in the Yankee machine.
And you're exactly right. I mean, you took the words out of my mouth there, where he could go to the Mariners and be the guy. You know, some guys it's about money. Some guys, they want to be the guy. They want to be the franchise player. And I like it. I respect that move from him, where he says, you know what, I've had success. I've gotten wins with the Yankees. Let's see what I can do being the face of a franchise. Yeah.
And then if you look at also just because obviously I'm from that part of the country, with how much Ken Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez, Ichiro, or Felix Hernandez are universally loved, I think that might have been something that might have been appealing to him too.
Absolutely. Even, back here to the Midwest, a guy like Reggie Miller who played for the Pacers never won a title, but he stayed there and he made the franchise viable after decades of just blah.
Yeah. And I'd imagine if you ask the average Pacer fan now about Reggie Miller, one of the first things out of their mouth wouldn't be that, he didn't win a title. Like had he played for the Celtics or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, there were times in his career he could have, I think when a couple years before he retired, there was a chance for him to go to the Lakers when the Lakers were reloading.
They were building that super team.
Yeah, and he had a chance and he decided not to, and that's when the Lakers ended up going after the corpse of Gary Payton at the time.
Yeah.
The corpse of Gary Payton.
Yeah. He finally won his ring after about 50 years, with Miami.
Yeah.
I was happy for Gary when
so was
put
I.
a ring on the glove.
Yeah. And then I think also just with going back to that's something else interesting is like there are certain players that, because I was a huge Gary Payton fan. Obviously, I love the Sonics, and he was one of those players that I had no problem with ring chasing.
Yeah.
There's certain players that I think, same thing when Steve Nash went to the Lakers, I had no problem with it, because I think if any player in the NBA deserved a ring chase, it was him.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think when you're up at that age by that point, and you've already done what you can for the franchise, like what Steve Nash was not doing anything else for the Suns. They were not going to get back to the finals.
Like he got them. Steve Nash got the Suns to as high as they could have gotten, and I think had they kind of similar with the Pistons in the East, the bad boy Pistons in the East, if they weren't just smack dab in the middle of the Spurs dynasty, I think that they could have won a title or two.
I remember most Suns fans actually cheering when Nash went to L.A. because they thought this is a chance for Steve Nash to get a championship.
Yeah, I know
for him.
I know a few Suns fans that were saying that. I mean, a lot, and one of them was a friend of mine that he hates the Lakers more than I think.
Exactly. They hate the Lakers, but they're like, you know what? Steve's getting a chance to win with Dwight, Kobe, and Powell. Fuck it, go for it.
Like they had the exact opposite feeling with Amari, but with Steve Nash also just I think how much he did for that franchise and just
it's way different
relevant.
With Amari.
Yeah.
Amari was like a young player who just took a bunch of money to go play in New York, and he wasn't going to be winning anything anytime soon anyway. Whereas Nash is like a veteran player who'd spent a majority of his career in Phoenix.
And he had other opportunities to leave, and he didn't.
He didn't, exactly. They're way different situations. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think leaving when you're in your prime and leaving when you're after your prime, like we said, a Steve Nash going to the Lakers, he was well beyond his best basketball playing, and I think we can respect that for them, a player that's been in the league 6 years each.
Being with Steve Nash, I would imagine that, like,
We're going to try to add Josh back to the call.
Okay.
Randy, you want to go ahead and say what you were going to say?
Oh no, that was all my point though. I thought they were talking about someone leaving, towards the end of their career, joining another team instead of, leaving in their prime, realizing, okay, I'm not going to win this year. And
doing Amari, Carmelo, LeBron, etc.
Yeah, exactly. But back on topic, as far as the all the way back to the Rangers, I think the Rangers, it was going to be a bit of a struggle this year, especially one game under 500, and now that you've lost Prince Fielder for the season with a neck surgery. I mean, there was a chance he was going to try to stick it out and play, but they were saying that his arm strength and his left arm was 50 and 60%. There's no way he's going to be viable and be at anywhere near the level he needs to be for them to be successful.
Yeah.
I think shutting him down for the year, having the surgery, was the right move in the long run.
Yeah, especially because, I mean, like I mentioned, I think this is one of the, I think if the Rangers were in first place, I think this might have been a little different story, and also the fact that, I mean, Prince Fielder wasn't exactly having a great year. He was batting under 250, only had 3 home runs, 16 RBI, so it wasn't like he was having a great year to begin with, and I think maybe this might have been just maybe for him. I mean, obviously you don't ever wish neck surgery on anyone, but this might give him a chance to just kind of be able to fully recuperate and everything for next year, and maybe give the Rangers a legitimate shot at a World Series title next year.
Well, and I believe this is his first major injury too.
Yeah, you might be right.
I don't think he's had any other large, more than the normal bump or bruise during the season.
Yeah.
This is his first real big injury.
No, he's not a guy who misses a lot of games. So definitely not.
Like, I think he's probably been on that DL a few times here and there with, like, sore shoulder or something, but nothing major.
Yeah.
Right.
Nothing like this.
Which everybody, you can't really, get like baseball. There's so many games in the season. Everybody's gonna hit, the injury bug at some point. No, he's a guy who's not hurt very often. So
yeah,
that's good for him.
I mean, there's no Cal Ripken Jr.'s hanging around right now.
Well, I think we've gone on back and forth on the Prince Fielder to Steve Nash wagon long enough. We've got a few more months to go before we hit the baseball playoffs, and during that period of time, will also be the beginning of the NFL season. But until that starts, we have to just sit around and just make do with what we have. And we got a lot of prediction stuff we can do. We'll go into some NFL stuff. I want you guys to each give me a rookie to watch this year. Josh, I'm going to start with you.
Offense, defense, or any?
Doesn't matter, just one rookie.
Okay, one rookie. I would probably say Bishop Sankey, because it's going to say, the whole, the running back position has been devalued, which is true. But if you look at he's the perfect example of what a lot of NFL teams are looking at. I think the two perfect player comparisons to him are Giovanni Bernard and Doug Martin, where he's not Adrian Peterson as far as size or anything like that, but there's not one thing he does great, but he does everything really well. And people forget with Bishop Sankey. I think it's because he played at Washington. His last year at Washington, he rushed for over 1,800 yards and 20 touchdowns. So it's not like he has experience being an every down back. And in Tennessee, who's there in front of him? Sean Green, who averaged about 2.5 yards a carry. I mean, if for nothing else through volume, he's going to be a player to watch, and he's going to get a ton of reps.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Randy? Give me a rookie to watch this year.
I really like Brandon Brooks from Oregon State. He was picked by the Saints. He was the Blitnikoff winner. That's the award for the best wide receiver. He's kind of that atypical Saints receiver. He's only 5'10", 189, super fast, 4.33 40-yard time. And, his numbers at Oregon State were great. 195 catches, 2,881 yards, and 21 touchdowns in 2 seasons. But he just that size and the type of player that he is just fits perfectly with the Saints system. I really like that pickup.
I'm with you on Cooks big time. Yeah.
And also from his numbers, you think about before this last season, he was the number 2 to Marcus Wheaton. So
yeah,
can only imagine what his numbers would have been without Wheaton around.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the Saints player as well. Saints corner Stanley Jean-Baptiste. I wept a little when they drafted him because I know how good the guy is. A lot of comparisons to Richard Sherman. Same height, 6'3", 23 pounds heavier, but only 7/10 slower 40 time. A lot of extra muscle, but a similar speed. Both vertical and broad jumps 3 inches higher than Sherman's combine numbers, and playing in Rob Ryan's defense, I think Baptiste is going to blossom into a terrific corner. Now, just because they have really close measurables doesn't mean they're going to be the exact same type of player. But
how many 6'3" corners get compared to Richard Sherman now? It's like every short quarterback gets compared to Russell Wilson.
A lot of that all that extra size, though, you can screw up 90% of the play and still just stick your arm out and bat the ball down. I think Baptiste is going to have a huge career in New Orleans. I think that he's going to be a terrific corner. I'm not expecting the same things as Richard Sherman. Obviously, every player is different, but he has a lot of the same aggressiveness and playmaking ability too. He breaks on the ball really well. The comparison just screams at me. And I mean, you don't like making the comparisons, but like if you have to compare him to anybody, Sherman just makes the most sense with the aggression and the same size and everything. He's a big corner. If you look at the guy, he's tall and muscular. Yeah. Those kind of corners are a handful for the smaller receivers. I hope Brandon Cooks doesn't have to go against him in practice, or he's going to get pushed around.
Well, also with that, if you look at some of the receivers in that division, that was a smart pick. I mean, Julio Jones, Roddy White, Kelvin Benjamin, Vincent Jackson, Mike Evans.
Oh yeah.
The NFC South wide receiver stable is a basketball team.
Yeah, you got to get the corners that can play with those big receivers. You know, you got to be able to match up size with size.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's ironic that we both picked a Saints player, Randy, because we're going to go ahead and give our way too early predictions on division winners. I'm looking at some schedules and some stuff from last year. My NFC South winner, I know Josh isn't going to like to hear it. I think the Saints are in a prime position to go back to the Super Bowl this year. I think that I loved their draft. I think losing Darren Sproles isn't going to be a big a deal as people think. A guy I'm really high on from camp from 2 years ago, Kyrie Robinson, I expect to take over that starting load for the running back position. I think the Saints will run the ball a little bit this year, but I could see Breeze having a close to Peyton Manning type season this year. Jimmy Graham having another great year. It's a contract year for him. He's looking at a big payday next season. And I think the Saints defense is going to be really good. I expect a Rookie of the Year performance from Baptiste. I could see the Saints winning 13, 14 games this year. So I definitely think that the Saints just nailed it every turn in this offseason. Jarris Byrd is a hugely underrated signing too. Arguably the best safety in the league. They paid him on the back end of their secondary. Like, I am terrified of every team that has to play the Saints this year. They just loaded up so much. And as much as I hate slurping on them as a Vikings fan, I definitely think that they're terrifying. Another team that I hate to slurp on that I also think is going to be really good this year is Green Bay. I think Green Bay is almost a shoo-in to win the NFC North. I'm not as in love with the Chicago signings as other people are. I think Clinton Dix falling to them at 21 was a huge signing for them. Their safeties had 0 interceptions last year. I think with a healthy Aaron Rodgers and Eddie Lacy in year 2, the Packers are going to be really good. Also, Devontae Adams, who's coined himself the nickname Optimus Prime, is a good addition to their receiving core with Boykin and Jordy Nelson. Adams has a lot of the similar abilities that James Jones had in Green Bay. So Green Bay's offense, if they're healthy, they're just firing on all cylinders. They don't even need the defense to couple with it. But I think Dix is going to be a ball-hawking playmaker in that defense. And if he even gets them 4 interceptions, that's like almost 2 more wins for Green Bay, plus whatever wins they get from having a healthy Aaron Rodgers. So
absolutely.
I think Green Bay and San Francisco are both, or Green Bay and New Orleans are both scary teams. And the other one, San Francisco, I think San Francisco is going to overtake the NFC West this year. For the last 2 years, I've thought they had the most talented roster in the division. I think Seattle lost a little bit with their rotation guys going. You can't rely on Percy Harvin being healthy all year. I love the Niners additions. I think having Michael Crabtree all season and bringing in Stevie Johnson gives them a deep threat. I think that'll help Kaepernick out a lot. And I don't think losing Alden Smith is much of a big deal as you'd think. And they have a tough schedule, but it's a little less tough than Seattle's. So I think San Francisco wins theirs. And my weird pick is actually Washington to win the NFC East. I think having a healthy Robert Griffin is going to be a big deal. New head coach in Washington, and I think that they have a favorable schedule. They play all three of their NFC East counterparts in the last 3 weeks of the season, and 2 of those games are at home. They also play the Dallas Cowboys in Week 17, and Josh will tell you whoever plays the Cowboys Week 17 wins the NFC East. So I think that getting to play 3 games against your division, 2 at home in Week 16 and 17, and then having a pretty favorable schedule, getting to play all the last place teams like Minnesota, Atlanta. I think that'll be favorable for Washington. They also have a favorable early part of their schedule. I think I had them racking off at least 3 out of 5 wins the first 5 weeks. So I think Washington will be good enough to win the NFC East this year. Clearly, roster-wise, inferior to the other 3 teams, that I picked. But I think that in the NFC East, it doesn't take a lot to win. I could see Foles regressing this year. I think that he had a lot of throws last year that he got lucky weren't interceptions. And I think Dallas's defense is still too bad, and then New York is a mess. So I think Washington wins the NFC East. I'm gonna let you guys go ahead and do your NFC teams before we talk about the AFC. So Randy, I'll start with you.
Well, my kind of surprise pick is going to be in the NFC North. I'm actually picking the Lions.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm picking the Lions is because this is now or never year for them. I think if they muddle through mediocrity again, if they don't win the division, if they miss, I think they at least need to make the playoffs this year. If they don't make it this year, I see them blowing up that team. So I'm going to pick them as kind of my surprise pick. I didn't want to go chalk all the way across. I do think Green Bay is probably the better team. The South, it's the Saints. I agree with you completely. I could see them making a Super Bowl run. Just kind of the pieces are kind of forming together back for them. For the East, I'm picking the Eagles. I'm interested to see what offense, what can they change going into that second year. They started off guns blazing in the beginning of the season, and the defenses began to figure them out. I'm interested to see what Chip Kelly can come up with in his second year. So I'm excited to see what they can do. Also, a couple signings on the defensive end have I think will help them up too, because their defense let them down too much last year. And the West, I agree with you, 49ers. I think there's always kind of that little bit of a Super Bowl hangover. I think there will be one for the Seahawks. The 49ers have gotten better. I love the Stevie Johnson signing. So, yeah, Lions, Saints, Eagles, Niners.
2 points to get with you on. The Eagles losing their top receiver to the Redskins is a big part of why I picked Washington to win the division.
Yeah.
Deshaun Jackson. And then the other one, I read earlier, I think it was yesterday, the Lions' offensive line allowed the second fewest sacks by any starting quarterback to play all 16 games, only to Peyton Manning and the Broncos. And a lot of that actually kind of is a shot at Matt Stafford, because if you throw 19 interceptions when you're not getting sacked hardly at all, what does it say about your decision-making? I think Jim Caldwell is a good coach to bring in to help develop Stafford. He does well with quarterbacks. We'll see. He did a good job with Flacco in Baltimore. I will see how he does with Stafford in Detroit. If they have another season like they did this year where they fall apart, maybe you're looking at a different quarterback in Detroit, because I'm not convinced yet that Stafford can take them to a Super Bowl. He throws for 5,000 yards, and that's great, but if you're not winning big games, then I don't think it matters. So. Yeah,
exactly. I think if they struggle this year, I think they're really going to have to start looking at their options for quarterback, because, I mean, how much rope do you give Matt Stafford when you're throwing to a guy like Calvin Johnson?
Another big help to them, Eric Ebron is going to be like their number 2 wide receiver, basically, and Golden Tate in the slot. They've got weapons. There's no excuses for Stafford anymore.
No.
You had a good offensive line, and you've got tons of weapons. Reggie Bush,
and they have about 45 different slot receivers.
Yeah, they are loaded up on offense, so you better put it together this year, Stafford, or you're gone. Josh, give me your NFC division winners.
So I'm going to go with NFC South. I'm going to go straight homer pick all the way with Atlanta. I don't care. But what I will say, though, is with them is I think their 2 biggest deficiencies were the 2 lines going in after last year. And this is a perfect example, really, of they basically, because I think Atlanta, besides going into last year, besides the 2 lines, I think they were fine. It was just when the offensive line, I believe Matt Ryan was pressured. I think it was like 48, 49 or somewhere in their percent of his dropbacks. That it's hard to win. It's hard to win more than 4 games with that kind of pressure. And that really showed, I think. And also, he's also beginning when they helped shore up the offensive line by signing John Asamoah in as a free agent and drafting Jake Matthews with the 6th overall pick. Jake Matthews, who a lot of people, myself included, actually thought was the best pure offensive lineman in the draft. Plus the on the defensive side, the one thing I will say is they would switch to a 3-4. The one hole I do see with them is outside pass rusher, just because they have a lot of they have a lot of guys at that outside linebacker position, but I don't see any one guy except for maybe Jonathan Massaquoi that jumps out. Like, I don't think they're going to have one. I think what they're going to have to scheme for a pass rush, which is they're going to have to. But they have plenty of interior pass rushers with Rashid Hageman, who they drafted in the second round, Jonathan Babineau, Corey Peters. But they're going to have to, I think, scheme for a pass rush. That's the one thing that can hold them back. But really, the NFC South, like every division in the NFC, they're all more or less even. And just pure homerism, and just getting Julio Jones, a top 5 receiver, back healthy, and Roddy White will be finally healthy. I think that will help them. And then from the North, I'll go with Green Bay just because no other team in the division has done enough, I think, to show me that they can unseat Green Bay. I mean, for all, I mean, it's getting to the point where I think the Bears, going to win the division stuff is getting to Cowboy territory where it's every year something goes wrong, that's an excuse. And the Lions, well, there's the Lions. Something's going to go wrong with them. It happens every year. And the Vikings, I think, will be better. I just don't think they'll. I think they're still a year away from really competing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the East go with the Redskins, and then not just because they play the Cowboys in Week 17, but you guys have I'm not going to belabor the point with their free agent signs. But people forget too with and their draft. I thought was for not having a first round pick. I thought they had a really nice draft. For people forget because with the RG3 stuff last year, his rookie year was one of, if not the most impressive rookie years of all time. And I think if he can get back to that form, they can win 12 games.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine.
Especially in that division.
Yeah, exactly.
And that division is going to take 7 wins to win anyway.
They remember the year they won the division his rookie year. They started off really poorly, and I think they're going to have a lot better start this year to kind of like cushion them for the end of their schedule. So, I mean, you just win those games in your own division at home, and I think you win the division. So it's hard to pick against them in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to go through the AFC teams real quick. I've got New England because there's not really any competition in their division for them yet. I like the Jets' off-season signings if it was 2006, but I don't think the Jets compete with New England yet. Miami's still a mess. I hated their first-round draft pick. I don't think that they're even close. Buffalo, it's really hard for wide receivers to make a transition to a pro-level receiver right away. So I think Sammy Watkins will have a little bit of a trouble making enough of an impact of getting Buffalo into the playoffs this year. But I do like Kiko Alonso. I think in a couple years Buffalo will be a pretty good team. And I believe in E.J. Manuel, so don't get rid of him yet, Buffalo. AFC North, I'm going to go a little off the wall and pick Pittsburgh. I liked how they finished the season last year. I really liked their draft. Steven Tuitt and Ryan Shazier were both really good scheme fits for their defense. Well, the idea of Timmons and Shazier going up the middle has a lot of speed from the middle linebacker position. Steven Tuitt is a great 3-4 linebacker, and they got the fastest guy in the draft in Dre Archer. I think Pittsburgh had a really good draft, and I think that the way they finished the season last year. Also, Cincinnati having to replace their offensive and defensive coordinators this year and kind of making a transition to being more of a run-first team. And me not being a big believer in Andy Dalton is going to affect how I think of Cincinnati. Cleveland's still a couple years away. And I liked Baltimore's draft, but I don't think they're close yet either. They didn't address the running back position. I think there's some problems there with Ray Rice. Aside from his legal troubles, he struggled last year. You might even see Bernard Pierce take over the starting job this year. He kind of fits the running scheme they run anyway. For the AFC South, I have the Colts getting first. I think that they're still the superior team. No one else in the division has a quarterback yet. Second place would probably be the Texans just because of how nasty their pass rush is going to be. And I think Fitzpatrick can hold it down better than Henne or Locker this year. And then the AFC West up to Denver. Denver's my pick for the Super Bowl from the AFC. They brought in DeMarcus Ware. They brought in Aqib Talib. They made so many improvements on defense. They brought in Bradley Roby in the draft. They signed that wide receiver from Indiana. Emmanuel Sanders is a receiver I always thought was really underrated in Pittsburgh. Monty Ball's going to get touchdowns in Denver. He's the running back you have to be. I don't like his pass blocking, but he's going to get the goal line touches, and that's all you need with Peyton Manning. So he's just going to get like 10 touchdowns. It's going to be fine. So I think Denver is a really good pick. I think a Denver New Orleans Super Bowl is also really exciting. I love offensive fights. So Randy, give me your AFC division winners.
I have the Patriots because, like you said, there's no one really in their division that I don't think can put up a good fight. Broncos for almost the same reason. I do think the Chiefs continue to get better. I think they're still a year away. The South, I like the Colts, but I also think that this year I look to see a lot of improvement from Tennessee. this season. I think they'll be a lot more competitive than they have been in years past. And in the North, I'm going to pick the Bengals just for the same reason I picked the Lions. I think it's kind of that now or never year for Andy Dalton. I think he's beginning to wear his welcome there, and I think they're waiting. You know, they've seen a little bit of improvement. I think the fans are getting tired of when are they going to take that next step. So I think there's a lot on the line for both Dalton and for Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati.
A couple things there. The New England thing, I think even if they didn't play in a weak division, getting Darrelle Revis and having Vince Wilfork back this season are going to be huge additions for New England, especially if they can get Gronk for like 12 games even. That'd be great. I agree with you. Andy Dalton's about to make $16 million next year. I don't think Cincinnati keeps him if he doesn't show them something this year. And then with the AFC South thing, I love Tennessee right now. I love their moves they made. Jake Luan, Bishop Sankey, great picks. I just don't believe in Locker. I don't know if they have a quarterback yet until they get one. And I'm terrified of Mettenberger because he had so many red flags with his like off the field stuff and his injuries, the back and the knee. Like I know that Wisenhunt can develop a quarterback, but until they get one in there for him to do that with, I think Tennessee's a couple years away still. I mean, Andrew Luck's fifth best quarterback in the league, in my opinion. So I think Indianapolis is still got that going. Tennessee's a couple years away. Josh, let me give you your division winners in the AFC.
All right, we'll start off with the AFC South since I was the Invoke thing. Indianapolis, because my aforementioned man crush on Andrew Luck. But I do expect the Titans to really surprise a lot of people and maybe be the Chiefs of this year. And unlike, I think, every other person on the planet, I actually believe in Jake Locker just because of when he was actually on the field, and he actually played really well, I thought. And just with really, because he's one of those, he can be hard to game plan for if he can get just if he can just stay on the field. That's the only issue he has. I'm gonna go with the AFC, the Patriots, because I mean, no team in that. Like I do think that Sammy Watkins, because I think he's more in the Julio Jones and AJ Green mold. I think he'll have an impact, but I just don't think it'll be enough of an impact for them to legitimately be a contender. The Broncos, I think they'll win it as well, but I don't think they're going to run away with it as much just because I don't see Peyton repeating that season. Not saying he's not going to have a great season, but I could see his touchdown total maybe dipping by about 8 to 10 and maybe 400 or 500 passing yards. But that's still, I think, more than enough to win 12 games. And then the AFC North, the Ravens, why the hell not? I mean, the Steelers, they had a nice draft. They have some nice young pieces, but at the same time, I've seen it happen too many times with them where they just if Big Ben can't stay healthy, they fall apart. And with the Bengals, well, the Bengalness of them, Andy Dalton, everything, and the Browns, well, water's wet, grass is green. The Browns finished 4-12.
I'll give you a couple things there. I want to say Pittsburgh getting Marquise Pouncey back for the whole season this year and having Le'Veon Bell for 4 additional games are going to be big things to help Pittsburgh out this year too. And then for the Denver thing, I kind of agree with you. Manning's numbers will drop a little bit just because not having Moreno there to pass block for him, so they're going to use Ronnie Hillman more, and not having a running back who can just burst for all those like 1,000 yards like Moreno was able to do. I think those things are going to affect Denver. Yeah, so I agree with you on Manning's numbers dropping. Just a couple other things to consider with Pittsburgh that I've had to touch on. With Bell will be able to play the entire season and not 75% of it this year. And also having Marquise Pouncey for the entire year is going to be huge because he's the best center in the NFL. So, real quick, Josh, touch on the Aaron Hernandez thing for us, and then we're gonna go ahead and deal with the NBA lottery talk next week. We're running out of time. So, Josh, go ahead and talk to me about Aaron Hernandez. What's going on with him?
All right. Aaron Hernandez, as many of you probably, former New England Patriots wide receiver, was arrested.
He's a wide receiver now. He was a tight end.
Oh well. You know. Former New England Patriots tight end, was arrested around this time last year for in the 23rd, and he was in jail awaiting the trial for the 2013 murder of Odin Lloyd, and that's not the only murder he has been linked to. He's also been charged with the murder of two more accounts of first-degree murder revolving around a July 2012 drive-by shooting outside of a nightclub. He also recently has been he was charged in a I don't know what they're called, a prison fight, I guess. I mean, and then there's he also has a few In addition to two counts of first-degree murder, he's been charged with 3 counts of armed assault with intent to murder, and 1 count of assault and battery by no means with a dangerous weapon. And he's been linked to the Latin Kings gang going back to high school. I mean, this is a perfect example of some guys just not getting it. And he just, I don't know what he
didn't do it.
I guess. I mean, I guess the glove doesn't fit or something. I mean,
it wasn't him.
His rap sheet's about as long as Peyton Manning's touchdown chart. I mean, yeah,
it's disgusting, and how much stuff this guy's gotten away with. Like, yeah. I can't even defend him, and I'm a huge homer for the Gators. Like, I just ugh.
Yeah, I mean,
go rot in prison, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, if you look at just his rap sheet, all these murders, assaults, all this stuff. I mean, perfect example with the recent NFL draft. People say the boys will be boys, and people being young and immature, which is true. But this is an example of sometimes, and some people just don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean,
sometimes these things are accurate, and you should actually be worried a little bit. Like,
yeah. Cause, I mean, when he was coming out of Florida, you could probably tell this a lot better than I could. There's no reason that without the off-field questions with him coming out of Florida, he would have been a first-round pick.
Yeah, for sure.
Just from a talent standpoint alone, and I mean, New England still. I don't think they haven't been able to fully replace his production, but
I mean, Hernandez made Tim Tebow a first-round pick. So.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah.
And a Heisman winner.
Apparently, Tebow didn't rub off enough on him when they were in college.
Yeah, he kept telling him he needs.
I think
fuck you.
Yeah, I never actually heard a story. They were actually roommates in college.
Well,
that would have been a reality show I would have watched.
A gang member.
Sounds like a bad sitcom.
Yeah, right.
Jesus lover.
Jesus yeah. I think every Florida player but Tim Tebow got arrested at one point or another.
Right. Funny story about a guy who plays in your division who went to Florida, Cam Newton. He was originally a part of the Florida Gators, and he got kicked out of school for stealing laptops from his.
Yeah, he stole Brandon LaFell's laptop, former teammate.
Yeah, he was stealing laptops. They kicked him out of school. He went to a little school, then he went back to Auburn, and then he went to Auburn and won a national championship. And fuck Cam Newton.
And I think that might have been part of the reason why Urban Meyer had his quote unquote heart condition.
Right. Yeah, I'd be mad too. I am mad. Shit. Right. One more thing we're gonna touch on. Landon Donovan didn't make Team USA for soccer this year. That's surprising to a lot of people. Age was a big factor. They want to get younger. Surprising. I know a lot of people are saying they don't want to support Team USA this year because Landon Donovan isn't on the team. Do you guys have any quick thoughts on that before we go? You can go ahead and touch on that.
He's honestly one of the 5 soccer players I've ever heard of. So
yeah.
I'm not going to act like an expert.
Right.
I think Klinsmann here. Donovan is still probably one of the 23 best soccer players in the United States. I think this is more of a move by Klinsmann to go ahead and begin the new era of players. I think he hands the team over to Clinton Dempsey. The team is a lot younger than they were, median age than they were 4 years ago. But it's definitely going to be unusual watching the U.S. men's national team without Landon Donovan. It's just going to be unusual. He was such a staple for that entire program, and he, like I said, he probably deserved to be in there. But I think this is Klinsmann finally saying, okay, we're going to move on. We're going to start building this program the way Klinsmann wants to build the team.
Bring back Pele. All right. Josh, go ahead and get your plugs in.
All right, yeah, there's my Twitter at Gomez_time76, my fantasy football blog, probably should have talked about, I don't know, fantasyfbcorner.wordpress.com, and if there's any pro wrestling fans out there, me and a friend of mine also run a pro wrestling-related blog. It's wrestlecrew.wordpress.com.
All right, Randy?
Hit me up on Twitter at Rowsdower24, ROWSDOWER24. Hit me up if you want to chat sports.
All right, cool. And then you can check out the archive version of the show on YouTube and Stitcher Radio. You can follow us on Twitter at Sport Talk Weekly. You can like us on Facebook, facebook.com/sportstalkweekly. Tune in next Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be talking about why the NBA should potentially change its NBA draft lottery system, what the Cleveland Cavaliers should do with their number 1 overall pick, the Kevin Love stuff. We'll be talking some fantasy football. We got all kinds of good stuff on the show. So tuning into that. And thanks for tuning in to this extremely long episode of Sports Talk Weekly. And you guys have a good night.